for his wisdom. The man came in to him one day and said, "Doctor, I want you to see what's wrong with me." The doctor started examining him, checked him over, and said, "Your heart's fine, your lungs are great, your blood pressure's normal, but you look like you're run down, tired, disillusioned, and unhappy. You need to do what I did. Go to the circus in town this week and laugh at the famous clown with his funny mask, his big shoes, and his slapstick. He's hilarious. I went and I laughed and laughed and laughed. I prescribed for you a visit to the same circus. Sit for 2 hours and laugh at that clown, and you will forget your troubles and have a happy heart." The man said, "Doctor, your prescription won't do me any good. I'm that clown." How many people put on a happy face for others when deep down their hearts are empty? We see this kind of thing all over the place in our society today, a society filled with empty people. That's why there's so much addiction, extramarital affairs, gluttony, alcoholism, workaholism. The number of followers, friends, and likes we get on social media is what matters to us. It's all an attempt to fill an emptiness that for some reason we just can't get to the bottom of. People are trying to fill a void that we can fill. We know it's there, but we don't know how to become whole. We don't know what to do to take care of that void. We live in a culture that is empty. Now, I'm not saying everybody, but you see it more prevalent today than any time. And it doesn't matter how successful we are. It doesn't matter if you've got the perfect spouse, how great your kids are, what we've obtained throughout life. Sometimes it just seems like even when everything is great, we just can't figure out why that emptiness is there. And we try everything that we know to fix it. I mean, in fact, the whole business of advertising is based on this. Think about it. You're not happy with what you have, and advertising comes in and says, "But this next product will fix it. You will be happy. It will fix your life." And sometimes it does for a while. But then that product's out of date, and you've got to get something else to replace it. It never fixes it permanently. Some of the most successful people that you'll meet in life, at least successful on the outside, are putting on a mask. They make it look like everything is perfect, but they're desperate, again, to fill that void in our lives. And we try to do this through a progression of what we've obtained, what we can gather in life. At first, we just try to gain more than what we have. It's all about gaining something, all about getting more, getting the next thing. You know, think about when you just started off out of college or out of the house for the first time, you're trying to put a home together. You don't really care what kind of furniture you have, do you? You just want something. But then you get a little more successful. So instead of more, you want better. So you replace all the furniture, or you replace the car, or you replace your wardrobe. But there's still a void there. There's still something that's not sitting right. So more leads to better, leads to different. Then by that we mean, everything has to be different. You can't have the same as anybody else. You want something that's bigger and better than them, than those around you. And it leads to gaining more, better, different. And we do that throughout our whole lives, and the next thing we know, the only thing that's left on the horizon is retirement. And we think, okay, well, that'll fix everything. We'll be full then when we can retire and spend time with family. But if you're empty before retirement, my guess is you're still going to be empty after retirement. Because there's only one thing, and we'll get to that here in just a few minutes, that will fill that void. And I think most of you know what that is, but we'll talk about that a little more in depth here in a little while. The thing is, this isn't new. This isn't something that just our generation or our culture is facing. Arguably, the wisest man in history saw the futility of all of this when he reflected on his life as he neared death. So if you want to read along with the scripture that we're going to look at, go ahead and turn to Ecclesiastes 1. Hold your place there, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But Solomon was granted wisdom from God. But because he asked for wisdom and not wealth or anything else, God granted him not only wisdom, He granted him everything that a man could have ever desired. He was granted with wealth, with success, everything. And in the end, we read Solomon's thoughts in the book of Ecclesiastes. And we find that nothing filled the emptiness that he felt in his life. So we're going to start in Ecclesiastes 1. And we're going to read through chapter 2. We might skip some of it, but I'm going to just pick up in chapter 1, verse 1. It says, "The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Absolute futility," says the teacher. Absolute futility. Everything is futile. It feels like emptiness, doesn't it? "What does a person gain for all his efforts that he labors at under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever." So in other words, all the work that we do in this life and nothing really changes. "The sun rises and the sun sets. Panting, it returns to the place where it rises. Gusting to the south, turning to the north, turning goes the wind. And the wind returns in its cycles. All the streams flow to the sea, and yet the sea is never full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are wearisome. More than anyone can say, the eye is not satisfied by seeing, or the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Can one say about anything, look, this is new? It has already existed in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of those who came before, and of those who will come after, there will also be no remembrance by those who follow them." Talk about depressing when you read through that. He continues, "I, the teacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem. I applied my mind to examine and explore through wisdom all that is done under heaven. God has given people the miserable task to keep them occupied. Now I've seen all the things that are done under the sun and have found everything to be futile, a pursuit of the wind. What is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, see, I have amassed wisdom far beyond all those who were over Jerusalem before me, and my mind has thoroughly grasped wisdom and knowledge. I applied my mind to know wisdom and knowledge, madness and folly, and I learned that this too is a pursuit of the wind. For with much wisdom is much sorrow. As knowledge increases, grief increases." So the more he learned, the more he studied, the more he observed, he realized how futile everything is. And he continued there in chapter 2. He says, "I said to myself, go ahead, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy what is good." But it turned out to be futile. I said about laughter, it is madness, and about pleasure, what does this accomplish? I explored with my mind the pull of wine on my body, my mind still guiding me with wisdom and how to grasp folly, until I could see what is good for people to do under heaven during the few days of their lives. So he tried pleasure, he tried alcohol, and it still seemed empty. Then he switches to possessions. He says, I increased my achievements. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made gardens and parks for myself and planted every kind of fruit tree in them. I constructed reservoirs for myself from which to irrigate a grove of flourishing trees. I acquired male and female servants and had slaves who were born in my house. I also owned livestock, large herds and flocks, more than all who were before me in Jerusalem. I also amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. He had so much silver that he actually devalued silver for a whole generation. I gathered male and female singers for myself, and many concubines, the delights of men. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. My wisdom also remained with me. All that my eyes desired, I did not deny them. I did not refuse myself any pleasure, for I took pleasure in all my struggles. And this was my reward for all my struggles. And when I considered all that I had accomplished and what I had labored to achieve, I found everything to be futile in a pursuit of the wind. There was nothing to be gained under the sun. So it didn't matter how much pleasure, how much joy he found in things, it all amounted to nothing. And he continued. He went to talk about his wisdom again. He says, Then I turned to consider wisdom, madness and folly, for what will the king's successor be like? He will do what has already been done. And I realized that there is an advantage to wisdom over folly, like the advantage of light over darkness. The wise person has eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. Yet I also knew that one fate comes to them both. So I said to myself, what happens to the fool will also happen to me. Why then have I been overly wise? And I said to myself that this is also futile. For just like the fool, there is no lasting remembrance of the wise, since in the days to come both will be forgotten. How is it that the wise person dies just like the fool? Therefore I hated life because the work that was done under the sun was distressing to me. For everything is futile and a pursuit of the wind. So wise or fool, we all meet the same fate. And then he tried work. He tried to throw himself into his work. He said, I hated all my work that I labored at under the sun, because I must leave it to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool. Yet he will take over all my work that I labored at skillfully under the sun. This too is futile. So I began to give myself over to despair concerning all my work, what I had labored at under the sun. When there is a person whose work was done with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and he must give his portion to a person who has not worked for it, this too is futile and a great wrong. For what does a person get with all his work and all his efforts that he labors at under the sun? For all his days are filled with grief, and his occupation is sorrowful. Even at night his mind does not rest. This too is futile. If you stopped right there, that's a pretty depressing couple of chapters, isn't it? But he understands that life is empty unless it's done with God. And he continues in verses 24 through 26 of Ecclesiastes 2. He says, there is nothing better for a person than to eat, drink, and enjoy his work. I have seen that even this is from God's hand, because who can eat and who can enjoy life apart from Him? For the person who is pleasing in his sight, He gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy. But to the sinner, He gives the task of gathering and accumulating in order to give to the one who is pleasing in God's sight. This too is futile and a pursuit of the wind. So he says everything's futile unless we realize that what we've been given has been from God. God is the only thing that can fill our void. You see, Solomon tried everything that he could think of. He had more wealth than anyone could have ever imagined. People from all over the world sought an audience with him because of his wisdom. And you know what? You usually build somebody up and then you get disappointed when you meet them. People went away thinking more of him than what they did before they came to him. They went away more impressed than they ever thought. He had beautiful woman after beautiful woman. He had all the alcohol that he could have ever wanted. And it was all meaningless. It was all left him empty. But he discovered that through God, life doesn't have to be empty, which is encouraging for us. I think most of us in this room understand this. Jesus is what fills the emptiness of life. And we make the decision to surrender to Him, and that should fill the void. But then why is the church across the world full of those things that we mentioned earlier? They're full of addiction. It's full of extramarital sex, full of gluttony, full of alcoholism or workaholism, or only caring about the number of followers or likes or friends that we get on social media. If Christ fills the void and fills the empty in our lives, why is the church full of emptiness? It's because as much as Jesus fills that void, we have to choose Him and choose to allow Him to work in our lives daily. It's not just a one-time decision. We have to choose Him daily. We don't get baptized and then magically life is a bed of roses. I think most of us realize that. But we forget that we have a mission that we have to do. We talked about mission over methods a few weeks ago. And I think our mission has a lot to do with this idea. Because here's what I mean by that. Those things that we try to fill our lives with to drive away the emptiness, they're all about us. It's selfishness. Drugs are about numbing the pain, but they drive our families away. Sex outside of marriage is all about making us feel better. Overeating is another attempt at filling the void. But it's all selfishness. So what do we need to do to combat selfishness? We need a mission that is bigger than ourselves. We need something that is driving us more than making money or numbing the pain or just all about us. Helping others. And yes, there are plenty of missions that we can get involved with that are bigger than ourselves. Just a few that off the top of my head, volunteering at a high school or at the school here in town, service projects around the community, finding and helping out at a pregnancy resource center, or helping with the suicide helpline, or finding an AA meeting and helping somebody come out of that addiction. There are many others. Those are just a few off the top of my head. But as Christ followers, I truly believe that we have the best mission that anyone could be involved with. A mission that is definitely bigger than ourselves. It's a mission that we looked at a few weeks ago. It's spreading the message of Jesus to anyone and everyone that we come in contact with. And not by standing and screaming at them, telling them that they're going to hell, but spreading a message of Jesus in a loving and generous and kind way. In fact, I would argue that Jesus wants us on mission with Him. It's how He fills the emptiness in our lives. It's how He gives us life and life to the full that He talks about in John 10:10. He tells us this in Luke 9:23 through 26. It says, "Then He said to them all, 'If anyone wants to follow after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life because of me will save it. For what does it benefit someone if he gains the whole world and yet loses or forfeits himself? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words, the Son of Man will be ashamed of him when He comes in His glory, and that of the Father and of the holy angels.'" See, He says it right there. If anyone wants to follow after me, let him deny himself. Let us empty ourselves of me and take up our cross and follow Him daily. Daily. It's a daily decision to do it. But He also says that whoever wants to save his life will lose it. In other words, if we try to do it on our own, we try to replace Him with other things, we become empty. We lose in the end. But if we lose our lives for His sake, then we're full. We're complete. Taking up our cross, following Him daily, that's how we save our life. That's how we avoid emptiness that permeates our society today. That's how we walk away from those things we mentioned before: addiction, extramarital affairs, gluttony, alcoholism, workaholism, and only caring about the number of likes or followers we gain on social media. You see, gaining the whole world without Jesus is meaningless. I think Solomon would agree with that. I think that's what we see in the first 2 chapters of Ecclesiastes. Giving your life to follow and to serve Him, and that's the only thing that matters. Let's go back to the story of the clown that I started with. I asked a question at the end of that story, but I left out one line. Here's the question I want to end with today. How many people put on the happy face for others when deep down their hearts are empty? Here's the part I left out. Only Christ fully satisfies the heart of man. Let's go out and introduce those that are lost and empty to the power of a relationship with Jesus Christ. If you have any